A cold wind snaked through the Kansas City depot. It found every gap in the wooden slats, crept beneath collars, and settled into bones. The children stood in a line, coats too thin, eyes too old. Steam hissed from the train like a warning, and the iron beast behind them groaned with the weight of its long journey. Clara, 7 years old, stood near the middle of the line. Her coat was buttoned wrong. Her shoes were mismatched. She held a sealed envelope with both hands, thumbs rubbing slow circles over the edges. The paper had softened from the oil of her fingers, but the flap remained shut. She never peeked. Not once. She scanned the tracks again, her chin tilted with hope, but her eyes held a question she didn't ask out loud. The boy beside her shifted, sniffling against the chill. "She'll come," Clara whispered, too soft for the grown-ups to hear. "My mama will come read it." The boy didn't answer. He looked at the tracks like she did, but without expectation. He'd stopped waiting a long time ago. The conductor's voice barked from the platform. "Load up. Next stop in 2 hours." The children moved in tired obedience. The wind pushed at Clara's back. She didn't move. She looked toward the street, toward the trees, toward the empty edge of the world. No footsteps came. 3 days earlier, the rain drummed a soft, steady rhythm on the tenement windows. The apartment was small, 1 room, 2 chairs, and a cot in the corner. The wallpaper peeled like shedding skin. The smell of coal and cabbage lingered in the corners. Mama sat at the table. Her hand shook as she signed the paper. The man across from her, with the gold chain watch and the ink-stained fingers, didn't meet her eyes. He tapped the document once and slipped it into his case. "Be ready by morning," he said. The door clicked shut behind him. Clara stood near the stove, still in her boots. Mud clung to her hem. Mama didn't cry. She folded a sheet of paper in slow, deliberate motions and slid it into an envelope. Her fingers pressed the flap down hard, sealing something heavy inside. She knelt. Clara stepped close. "Don't open it," Mama said. "Not until I come get you. You understand." Clara nodded once. Her braid swung like a pendulum. Mama tucked the letter into the inside of Clara's dress and smoothed it flat with her palm. "You'll keep it safe." "I will." They didn't hug. Mama stood and turned away quickly, as if something might break if she didn't. Clara kept the envelope pressed to her chest the whole night. The train howled against the dark sky. A moon hung low and yellow, stretched thin by smoke from the station's chimney. Children boarded with small sacks. Some carried nothing at all. Sisters held hands until they were pried apart. A boy clutched a canvas bag like it held treasure. Inside, a dead bird nestled among straw. The matron, a woman with a sharp face and a pencil tucked behind her ear, clicked her tongue and called out names. One by one, the children climbed into the carriages. No one smiled. Clara walked with her arms crossed over her chest, protecting the letter beneath her scarf. The coat had no buttons. Her shoes tapped unevenly on the wood planks. Inside the train, the seats were hard and stained. She slid into one by the window. A girl with a cough sat across from her and curled against the side. Clara turned her face to the glass. Outside, nothing moved but shadows. Her own reflection looked back at her, pale, still, waiting. It didn't blink. The train hissed as it slowed, steam rolling over the platform in waves. The wheels groaned to a stop in a town with no name posted. A schoolhouse stood in the distance. A dry goods store. A church. One dog barked. No one replied. A girl, maybe 10, was chosen. Her braid was freshly brushed. The matron called her name and nodded toward a man in denim overalls and a long face. He approached with the quiet confidence of someone used to buying livestock. He inspected the girl's teeth. She flinched. He signed a form, and the girl was led away. Clara watched from the window. "She'll cry tonight," she murmured. No one answered. The volunteer stepped into the carriage with a basket of bread. She smiled, tired but kind, and offered a piece to Clara. Clara shook her head. She folded the envelope tighter in her hands, her thumbs brushing it again and again. She was waiting. Her eyes never left the tracks. Frost clung to the train windows like lace, fragile, white, and creeping. The prairie rolled past in silence beyond the glass, a sea of dead grass and bare trees, half buried in snowdrift. The train groaned, its rhythm slow, steady, like the breath of something old and tired. Inside, the children slept in bundles, elbows pressed against ribs, chins tucked to chests. They breathed steam into the frozen air, their breath briefly visible before it vanished again. One girl mumbled in her sleep. A boy's foot twitched. A baby whimpered in someone's arms. Clara sat upright. She hadn't closed her eyes all night. Her fingers were tucked inside her coat, wrapped tight around the letter. She brought it out now, careful, slow. The envelope was soft from the touch of her hands, but unbroken. The paper had taken the shape of her palm over the days. She traced her thumb over the fold again and again. Her name was scrawled on the front in her mother's neat, upright hand. She brought it to her cheek. It still held a little warmth. The light from the rising sun cut across the train in long strips. Dust danced in it. The frost began to melt where the sun touched the window. Clara didn't look outside. She watched the letter, waiting. The station smelled of coal, stale paper, and sweat. The office was small, with one desk and 2 chairs. The matron stood behind Clara, straight-backed and pinched. Clara sat with her hands in her lap, feet swinging just above the floor. The envelope was folded into the cuff of her coat. The man behind the desk leaned forward. His fingers were stained with ink, fingertips blackened like bruises. He wore round glasses that slid down his nose. He looked at her shoes. "She's wearing 2 lefts." The matron nodded. She had to give hers up. They were soaked through last stop. The man made a note. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Clara. "What's your name?" "Clara." "Last name?" She hesitated. The matron interrupted. "Leroux. Clara Leroux." The man nodded again, scribbled. Then he looked back up. "I see you've been carrying something." He pointed to her coat. "What is it?" Clara pulled the envelope out slowly, held it in her lap. "A letter." He leaned forward, curious now. "From your mother?" Clara nodded. "May I read it?" She held the letter tighter. "She'll read it when she gets here," Clara said. The man blinked. He waited, then smiled gently. "I'm sure she will. But sometimes things happen. I could help you read it." Clara shook her head. "Once. Hard. She's coming." The room was very quiet. The matron let out a breath through her nose. "She's been saying that for days." The man didn't press. He only noted something else, then reached for a different folder. Clara slid the letter back into her coat. She sat still as stone. The noon bell rang across the empty schoolyard, clear and sharp. Snow flurried in the wind, swirling across the porch steps. A group of children stood in a row near the platform, waiting. A woman in a brown felt hat approached, her boots crisp against the wood. Her coat was wool, her hands gloved. She smiled with her whole face, wide and warm. She knelt in front of a boy with red curls and freckles. He stared at her shoes. She asked him something quietly. He nodded. She signed a paper. He was lifted into her arms. The matron stood by with a clipboard, scanning for the next name. Clara watched from the porch railing, coat buttoned tight, hands hidden. The boy looked back once. Then the woman and child disappeared into a wagon. The snow continued to fall. A volunteer with a thick scarf around her neck approached Clara. She had a crooked smile and kind eyes, though her hands trembled a little as she bent down. "You're a quiet one," she said. Clara didn't answer. She looked past the woman, across the white road, toward the edge of town. Her fingers flexed once beneath her coat, where the envelope rested against her stomach. The volunteer touched her shoulder. "I'll come check on you later." She walked off. Clara didn't look back. She kept her eyes on the road, waiting. The boarding house walls were thin. Wind pushed against the shutters all night, moaning like a faraway voice calling a name no one remembered. Clara lay on the top bunk of a narrow bed, too short for her legs. Her boots were beside the post, wet and muddy. Her coat lay folded beneath her head. The letter was inside, where it always was. She stared at the ceiling, arms crossed over her chest. The darkness felt close, heavy. Someone coughed across the room, deep and rattling. A girl began to cry into her blanket. No one comforted her. No one had the strength left. A train whistle echoed somewhere in the distance. Faint, hollow. Clara blinked slowly. She reached beneath her coat and pulled the letter out. She ran her hand over it like smoothing a wrinkle in time. The paper had begun to yellow around the edges. She didn't open it. She pressed it to her mouth. "She'll come tomorrow," she whispered into it. Then she tucked it back into her coat, curled onto her side, and waited for sleep that would not come. The wagon creaked to a stop in front of a station, just after noon. The wheels were thick with mud, the spokes splattered up the side. A woman stepped down slowly, gray skirt stiff with dried earth, shawl pulled tight over her shoulders. Her eyes were pale and dry, her hands calloused. She didn't speak to the matron. She just looked at Clara, long enough to decide. The matron cleared her throat. "This is Clara. She's small but strong." The woman didn't nod, didn't smile. Her eyes flicked to Clara's shoes, then her face. She said one word: "Help." Clara didn't ask what kind. She stepped down from the platform, her letter pressed flat beneath her dress. She felt it shift against her ribs as she climbed into the back of the wagon. The wind caught her braid and lifted it once before letting it fall. The woman turned the reins. They rode in silence into the prairie. The kitchen smelled of iron and dried beans. Wind howled against the slats of the wall. There were no curtains, just rough-hewn wood, a cast-iron stove, and a small table with 3 legs and a brick propping the 4th. A man sat at the head of the table. His shirt was brown with dust. His beard had gray in it. He chewed slowly, staring at nothing. There was a loaf of bread on a wooden plate, a chipped tin cup beside it. The woman placed a bowl in front of Clara without speaking. Clara sat. Her legs dangled from the chair, toes barely brushing the floor. She kept her coat buttoned, even indoors. Beneath the table, in her lap, lay the letter. She balanced it carefully as she ate, crust by crust, her eyes fixed on the grain of the table. The man never looked up. No one said grace. The sky was bone white, and the wind had gone still. The world felt muffled. Clara stood by the frozen river, her breath trailing out in faint, short bursts. Ice cracked under the bank near her feet, then settled. She wore borrowed boots now, too wide, but they held the cold out better than the last ones. Her gloves were patched with yarn. In her right glove, she held the letter. She didn't read it. She never did. She just held it close and hummed. It was the lullaby Mama used to sing, half French, half forgotten. Clara only knew 3 lines, and she sang them over and over until the wind picked them up and carried them away. She imagined the letter spoke, soft and slow, like her mother's voice when the lamp was low and the world was small. "Not yet, baby," it would say. "Not yet." She smiled, then turned, walking back across the cracked white field before the dark came. Snow fell all morning and didn't stop. In the barn loft, Clara sat cross-legged in a nest of straw. The air smelled of hay and rust. The horses below shifted but didn't make a sound. She unwrapped the ribbon she'd found 2 days earlier, bright red, frayed at one end. It had been tangled around a nail near the coop. She'd kept it hidden in her pocket until today. She smoothed the ribbon across her palm, then tied it gently around the envelope. The knot was small. Careful. She laid the letter in front of her and traced the edge with one finger. In the dust beside her, she used a stick to write her mama's name, Elodie Leroux. Again and again. The letters wobbled, uneven from the cold. When her fingers began to sting, she leaned back and looked through the cracks in the loft wall. The snow was still falling, quiet, steady, soft like sleep. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Merry Christmas." Then she pressed the letter to her chest and stayed very still. The church was small, whitewashed and leaning slightly from years of wind. The bell rang sharp over the field, calling voices that didn't answer. Inside, the preacher's voice filled the empty space. He spoke of mercy, of judgment, of a world after this one. Clara sat on the back pew. Her dress was clean but worn thin at the elbows. Her knees were dirty. Her shoes were dry. She didn't look up. She held the letter in both hands, folded tight, pressed to her chest. Her lips moved. No sound came. She stared at the worn wood of the pew in front of her, counting the knots in the grain. She didn't blink, and she didn't cry. She just waited. The snow had melted into the road, leaving behind ruts and soft edges where wagons sank. Puddles reflected a sky trying to turn blue. Crows cawed in the distant trees, their wings black slashes against the thawing light. Clara walked alone. She was taller now, nearly 8. Her braid swung with each step. Her boots left shallow prints behind her. Toe turned slightly inward on the left. She didn't notice. Her eyes were on the horizon, then the buildings ahead, then the depot wall. In her pocket, the envelope had become a part of her. The corners were soft and bent, the paper thinned at the seams. It had been folded and unfolded so many times it now moved like cloth when she touched it. She reached the depot, climbed the steps without hurry. A new layer of train schedules had been nailed to the board. She stared at them. Northbound, 8:15. Southbound, 3:10. No changes. Same as yesterday. She didn't sigh. She didn't cry. She just stood there, staring. Then she turned, walked back down the steps, and followed the road home, dust clinging to her hem. The platform hadn't changed. A bench waited beneath the awning. The sign still leaned a little to the left. Children came and went, some pressed close to their chaperones, others quiet as stones. Clara sat on the end of the bench, her coat neatly buttoned, her hands folded in her lap. She was older now. Her eyes told it, too still, too knowing. Her cheeks had lost their roundness. Her back stayed straight even when she slouched. She watched a woman take the hand of a small boy, his hair sticking out in tufts. The woman knelt and wiped his cheek with a handkerchief before leading him to the ticket window. The boy glanced back once, and Clara looked away. A man in a brown cap approached. He had a limp and smelled faintly of tobacco. He carried a paper bag in one hand and reached into it, pulling out a stick of candy wrapped in red paper. He held it out. "You waiting for someone?" he asked. Clara shook her head, then paused, then nodded. He offered the candy again. She didn't take it. After a moment, he shrugged and walked off. Clara turned her face to the tracks, still waiting. The storm came fast. Clouds swallowed the sun in minutes, and the wind hit like a slap. The sky boiled over with color, green and bruised purple. The trees bent low, their limbs scraping the ground. Clara ran from the pump, empty bucket trailing water behind her. The rain came in sheets, horizontal and sharp. By the time she reached the barn, she was soaked through. She threw open the door. The wind nearly tore it from her hands. She slipped in, stumbled over straw, collapsed against a post. The thunder cracked, closer than she expected. Her chest heaved. Her braid dripped down her back. She reached into her coat, instinctively. The pocket was empty. Her breath stopped. She scrambled. Hands plunged into the mud, just outside the door. Her fingers found it, the edge of paper, limp and heavy, half buried in the wet earth. She pulled it out. The envelope was ruined. Ink bled across the front. Her name, Clara LaRue, blurred into a bruise. One corner was torn, hanging by a thread. She dropped to her knees and rocked forward, holding it against her. The mud soaked her dress, her knees. She pressed her face to the letter. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The wind howled back. She stayed there long after the thunder moved on, rocking the torn paper like a baby. The depot had been repainted. The bench was new, smooth wood, no names carved into it. A ticket window had been replaced with glass. The roof no longer sagged. Clara sat on the bench. A long skirt covered her ankles. Her hair was pinned up, though the wind had pulled loose a few strands. Beside her sat a small girl, no older than 7. She swung her legs beneath the bench and traced circles in the dust with her toe. Her hands were sticky with candy. She licked her fingers. Clara held the envelope in her lap. It was yellow now, fragile. The red ribbon had faded to rose. The corners were still torn, still soft. She had never opened it. The girl looked at it with curiosity. "What is it, Mama?" Clara looked down at her daughter. She closed her eyes. "Something I once waited to hear." The train whistle blew in the distance. Neither of them turned to look.